Hi everyone, we're still on cells and we're in section 3.6 and we're going to be talking about metabolism. Metabolism can be one of the challenging topics, but again, I'm going to try to give you kind of a foundation in it just to give you enough information that we can talk about it in the context of the human body. So when we talk about the idea of metabolism, we're talking about all the chemical reactions that occur in the body. Or if you're a single-celled organism, it would be all the chemical reactions that occur in the cell, but in the living organism. And one of the things I always like to remind people of is biology is chemistry. So we're really a function of all these chemical reactions going on in our bodies. And our metabolism is just one term to describe all those chemical reactions. An important item in the concept of metabolism are enzymes. You might remember we talked a little bit about enzymes when we talked about proteins. Enzymes are made of proteins, and these are specialized proteins that speed up the rate of chemical reactions. Without enzymes, life would not be possible. Chemical reactions would just happen too slowly for us to be able to function the way that we do. Now, I just tried to find some kind of crazy, complicated looking picture that showed you a little bit about metabolism. And frankly, if you took a science major's level biochemistry class, you'd probably have to memorize all this. There's all sorts of things going on. This is like a really important pathway that's happening, a lot of chemical reactions that are happening in all of our cells. But what I want you to notice is what it's describing is, oh, here's some sugars, and then it shows you there's some arrows. There's an arrow, and it means this sugar is converted into this. And the arrow is corresponding to one or more enzymes. And so there's enzymes, there's these proteins that are going to do the job to convert these hexosugars into triose phosphate, whatever the heck that is. Okay, and there's some other enzymes that are going to take triose phosphate and turn them into pyruvate. And so think about this kind of like an assembly line, that a worker is going to take some object and it's going to make it into something else. You're going to start with something and end with something different. And the worker would be the enzyme, the thing that does the changing. So you can see that all of these chemical conversions are happening during metabolism. And there's actually probably thousands of chemical reactions like this that are essential to keep all of our cells going every day. So just a little bit about enzymes. So it says, explain the role of enzymes, substrates, and products in a metabolic reaction. So I just want to be able to use these terms and you understand what I'm talking about. So here's an enzyme. And the substrate is going to be the molecule the enzyme works on. So if I go back to this diagram, if I have these triose phosphates and there's an enzyme, they're converted into pyruvate. So the triose phosphate would be the substrate, the thing you're starting with. Then we have the enzyme is going to convert it into a product. So there's my enzyme. It's going to take this substrate, and you see, in order to do that, it has to stick to the substrate. Remember, we talked about proteins. Enzymes are made of proteins, that proteins have unique shapes. So notice that this enzyme is shaped in a way that the substrate can stick to it. And that shape where the substrate binds, called the active site. You'll see that, I think, in one of the questions on the lecture assignment. But the substrate's going to bind to the enzyme. The shape of the enzyme is critical because it's only going to change its own substrate. If this was shaped differently, you'd have to have a different substrate. So the substrate's the molecule the enzyme works on. It binds to the enzyme. The enzyme changes it. Remember, this is the assembly worker. It's going to change this molecule. And in this case, it broke this molecule into two separate pieces, and that's the products. So we've got the substrate plus the enzyme. The enzyme does its work, and now we have the enzyme and the product. And one of the important things about enzymes is enzymes can be used over and over and over again. So you can make lots of product from one enzyme. So if you understand that concept, we can build on it and let you see the idea of a metabolic pathway. And so in a metabolic pathway, one enzymatic reaction is going to be connected to others, and it's going to be highly regulated. So we have substrate A and enzyme 1, and enzyme 1 is going to convert A into B. B is the product. But in a metabolic pathway, the product of one enzymatic reaction is the substrate for the next. So in the second chemical reaction, the product of the first one is now the substrate, and a different enzyme is going to convert it into something else. And now this product is the substrate for the third enzyme, and now we're going to have a new product. And that's what we call a metabolic pathway. And that's what I was showing you in this diagram, that we've got a pathway. We don't usually just have one enzyme doing one thing. We usually have them working together. And just like an assembly line, you don't have one person that starts with a whole bunch of parts and makes a car. You have, we've got lots of steps that do it stepwise, and that's what happens in biology also. So here's a substrate, an enzyme, a product. Now this is the substrate, and here's a new enzyme, and here's a new product. And now this becomes the substrate for the next enzyme, and that's that enzyme's product. And we call that a metabolic pathway. So I told you all that because I want to talk about the mitochondria. So we're back to organelles, and this is the last organelle I'm going to mention. Remember, organelles are these separate compartments inside of eukaryotic cells that do unique things. We said the nucleus contains the chromosomes, the ribosomes are where proteins are made, but we also have mitochondria, and mitochondria are pretty unique in their appearance. They've got, they're made of a couple layers of membranes, they've got lots of folds, which gives them a lot of surface area, because they need a lot of surface area to do their function, which is to make ATP. So let's see, we've mentioned ATP before, and see if you can remember where. We talked about the 4 groups of organic molecules, the 4 groups of macromolecules. You remember what they are? Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. Remember that? ATP came up in which category? Nucleic acids. ATP was a nucleic acid, and we said ATP is an energy-carrying molecule. So we all know that we eat food, and that food is digested. And why do we eat that food? Well, one of the big reasons is we need energy. And why do we need energy? We need energy to talk and to breathe and to think and to build new cells. So mitochondria is where this ATP is made. So our food gets into our cells break down the food, and our mitochondria are going to take some of that food and make ATP. You might hear ATP called the powerhouse of, or might hear the mitochondria called the powerhouse of the cells. What's a powerhouse do? It means kind of like a power plant. I would call it the power plant of a cell. You put in fuel and it burns and we generate heat, or we get, in the case of cells, the energy comes out as ATP. It says cells with the highest energy demands have thousands of mitochondria. And here's an electron microscope picture of a mitochondria. And if you look at a single cell, here's a cell that's got lots of mitochondria packed in there. The kinds of cells that need a lot of energy, primarily probably the highest energy cells are muscle cells that have a lot of mitochondria. So you can see that some cells will have higher demands of energy, so they're going to have more mitochondria. Okay, so here's what I want to get to. Summarize the equation for the importance of cellular respiration. Here we go. Summarize the equation for and the importance of cellular respiration. So what the heck is cellular respiration? You might hear this called aerobic cellular respiration, meaning it's using oxygen. Aerobic means oxygen, uses oxygen. So summarize the equation for and the importance of aerobic cellular respiration, or you can just call it cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is a metabolic pathway. It's got a lot of enzymes and a lot of substrates and products that takes energy from our food and converts it to ATP. And you go, oh, wait a minute. You just told me the mitochondria takes energy from our food and converts it into ATP. So a lot of cellular respiration is occurring in the mitochondria. Most of our cells are doing this all the time. This metabolic pathway is absolutely essential for us to function every single second of our life. We need energy for everything that we do. This looks kind of weird, but it should sound familiar. It's the chemical equation for cellular respiration, or the overall equation for cellular respiration. Now remember, I said cellular respiration is a metabolic pathway. So it's got lots and lots of enzymes that are doing this. Even though there's only a couple arrows, there's probably 20 different enzymes involved in this process. But if we start with the beginning and end with the end and kind of lump all the middle stuff together, what cellular respiration does, this metabolic pathway, is it takes glucose. Which group of organic molecules is glucose? Hopefully you remember that it is a carbohydrate. In fact, it's a monosaccharide. In fact, it's the monosaccharide that's in our blood. And we use glucose for energy. We use a lot of other things for energy too, but I'm going to use glucose as the example here because a lot of our foods are converted into glucose. So we're going to take some kind of food, and in this case, glucose. Remember we said glucose is C6H12O6, has 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, 6 oxygens. There's glucose. In order for cellular respiration to occur, we need oxygen. So we need to breathe, which is why we call this aerobic cellular respiration. And that's why we have a respiratory tract, and that's why we're breathing all day, because we need oxygen to make ATP. This arrow is the arrow that says all these different enzymes in cellular respiration are going to work on these molecules. That's all this stuff. And the end products are going to be carbon dioxide. You can see some coming out there. Water, you can see some coming out there. And ATP. There it's coming there. This is something you should be able to relate to, because what do we have to do? We have to eat food and we have to breathe oxygen. And why do we do that? What happens when we do that? Well, we make a waste product, carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide we exhale, waste product, get rid of it. Water, we can use the water in our bodies. It's another kind of waste product, but we can use that. But the whole reason why we're doing this is to make this. Remember we said that cellular respiration, the job of it is to take energy from our food and convert that energy into ATP. And we can use that ATP to make new cells, to contract our muscles, to get our brains to work. Everything that we need energy for gets converted into that. We just can't use just sugar. We need to make it into ATP. Okay, so you should memorize this. This is going to come up in respiratory. It's going to come up a couple times during the semester. So the overall equation for cellular respiration, most of the chemical reactions are happening in the mitochondria. We're going to take glucose plus oxygen, giving us carbon dioxide plus water plus ATP. The whole reason we do cellular respiration is to take energy from our food and to convert it into ATP. And why do we need a respiratory tract? To take in oxygen, because we need it for this to happen, and to release carbon dioxide, because that's a waste product that's generated. Notice the oxygen's going in, the carbon dioxide's coming out. All right, good luck with that. That's the end of cells.